Have you ever walked into a place and immediately felt like something was wrong? Like unseen eyes were watching you, waiting for you to take just one step too far? Imagine entering a chapel in the dead of night, the air thick with the scent of burning wax and something rotting. You look behind you, but the heavy doors have already shut. And then you realize, no matter what you do, no matter how hard you scream, you can't leave. This is not just any church. This is a place where the walls whisper secrets, where the candles flicker even when there's no breeze, and where the shadows move, even when you don't. Would you dare step inside? Before we dive into this terrifying tale, make sure you like, subscribe, and share if you love horror stories that make your skin crawl. And let me know in the comments, what's the scariest place you've ever been to? Now let's begin. The rain had been falling steadily for hours, soaking the cracked pavement of Holloway Road. Thick fog curled around the gnarled trees lining the path, their bare branches scratching at the sky like skeletal fingers. Ethan Grayson pulled his coat tighter around himself as he trudged forward, his boots splashing through shallow puddles. He didn't want to be here. He never should have taken the dare. Just step inside, his friend Marcus had taunted him back at the gas station. Stay in the chapel for 5 minutes. That's it. Unless you're scared. Ethan wasn't scared. At least, that's what he told himself. The abandoned chapel had stood for centuries at the edge of town, long since condemned and forgotten. But people still whispered about it. About the preacher who vanished one stormy night. About the strange figures glimpsed through its shattered stained glass windows. About those who went in and never came out. Now standing at the foot of the decaying steps, Ethan hesitated. The chapel loomed before him, its wooden doors warped and weathered, nailed shut with thick rusted chains, chains that shouldn't have been broken, but now lay twisted on the ground. He swallowed hard and reached for the handle. The second his fingers touched the cold brass, the doors swung open with a deafening creak, as if they had been waiting for him. He took a hesitant step inside. The air was thick, too thick, almost suffocating. Dust floated in lazy swirls, illuminated by the flickering glow of dozens of candles scattered along the walls. The pews were lined up neatly, untouched by time, though the floor beneath them was warped and cracked. At the far end of the room stood the pulpit, draped in a black cloth, a single Bible resting open on it. Ethan pulled out his phone and hit the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, but something about the chapel made the light seem weaker, as if the shadows swallowed it whole. Then he heard it, a whisper, low, indistinct. Ethan spun around, heart hammering against his ribs. "Hello!" His voice barely echoed, as though the chapel itself refused to acknowledge his presence. Silence. He exhaled sharply, forcing a laugh. "Get a grip, man," he muttered. "It's just an old building." Then the whisper came again, closer this time, a dry, rasping voice. "You shouldn't have come." Ethan froze. The air turned ice cold. His breath came out in thin, misty wisps. He turned his phone's flashlight toward the pews, but there was nothing there. Just the dust, the darkness, the overwhelming silence. His fingers tightened around his phone. He had to get out. He had done the dare. 5 minutes was enough. He turned to the doors, and his stomach dropped. They were gone. Not just shut, not just locked. Gone. The entrance he had walked through moments ago was now a solid wall of aged stone. No doors, no windows, no way out. Panic clawed at his chest. He rushed forward, pressing his hands against the cold stone, feeling for any sign of an opening. "No, no, no," he whispered. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Then the candles flickered, their flames bending unnaturally, as though a breath had passed through the chapel. A deep, guttural chuckle echoed from the pulpit. Ethan turned slowly. The Bible on the pulpit had flipped open to a different page. A verse he didn't recognize was scrawled in blood-red ink. "Those who enter may never leave. The walls shall hold their souls forever." His pulse thundered in his ears. He took a step back, but the floor groaned beneath him. The pews had shifted. They weren't in the same position as before. Then the whispering returned. This time it wasn't one voice. It was many. Soft at first, then growing louder. Hundreds of voices overlapping, whispering his name, chanting the same words over and over. Stay, stay, stay. Ethan bolted toward the back of the chapel, his breath coming in ragged gasps. There had to be another exit, a window, a trap door, anything. His phone's flashlight flickered wildly as he moved, the battery draining far too fast. Then something grabbed his wrist, a hand, ice cold, skeletal, its fingers like iron. Ethan screamed, jerking away. His phone hit the floor, its screen shattering, the flashlight winking out. Darkness swallowed everything. The whispers stopped. Silence. Then a voice right beside his ear. Low. Inhuman. You are ours now. Ethan's scream died in his throat as the icy grip tightened around his wrist. The touch burned, not with heat, but with an unnatural cold that seeped into his bones. He yanked his arm away and stumbled backward, his body slamming into the nearest pew. His breath came in short, panicked gasps, his vision adjusting to the smothering darkness. The chapel was no longer empty. Figures stood in the pews, their silhouettes barely distinguishable from the shadows, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. Their eyes, if they had any, reflected nothing. No light, no life, just hollow, gaping darkness. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. Who? What? His voice cracked. He took a shaky step backward, but the figures remained motionless, watching. A dry, shuffling sound filled the air, a sound like old paper crumbling or bones grinding together. Then the whispers returned, but this time they weren't distant. They were inside his head. Run! 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 Ethan didn't need to be told twice. He bolted down the aisle, his footfalls echoing through the chapel. His hands fumbled in the dark, searching for a wall, an opening, anything. He didn't care if he had to break a stained glass window and throw himself through it. But the chapel had changed. The rows of pews stretched endlessly, shifting like a labyrinth, leading him in circles. The pulpit loomed ahead, even when he knew he had run in the opposite direction. The walls closed in, the ceiling arched higher, impossibly high, until it vanished into the void. The church was alive, and it was playing with him. His foot caught on something, something soft, something that moved, and he crashed to the floor. His hands landed on damp, pulsing wood, as if the ground itself was breathing. And then he saw it, the thing he had tripped over, a body, numbered bodies, dozens of them, half buried in the warped floorboards. Their hands reached out, fingers twitching. Some were skeletal, others fresh, as if they had only recently been trapped. Their mouths hung open, frozen in silent screams. Ethan scrambled away, bile rising in his throat. Then from above, a sound, a rasping breath. Something big moved in the darkness. Ethan looked up. A figure stood atop the pulpit now, a towering shape, cloaked in tattered robes of deep crimson, its face obscured by a veil of blackened cloth. But beneath the veil, something stirred, something alive, a writhing, twisting mass of flesh, covered in 1,000 tiny mouths. Whispering, chanting, singing in a language that burned his ears. Ethan couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. The thing lifted a single hand. Its fingers, long, clawed, too many joints, curled toward him. Come closer. The air around Ethan thickened, pressing down on him, forcing his limbs to move against his will. His legs dragged forward. His arms trembled at his sides. He tried to scream, but his throat was locked, his breath stolen. The congregation of shadows in the pews tilted their heads in unison, watching, waiting. Ethan's mind reeled. He couldn't escape. He knew that now. The chapel wouldn't let him. But then, something changed. The pulpit blinked. The monstrous thing's mouth snapped shut in unison. And in that deafening silence, Ethan heard something else. A voice. Familiar. Distant. Real. Ethan! His name shouted from somewhere beyond the walls. Someone, something was calling him back. For the first time since stepping into the chapel, hope flickered in his chest. He wasn't alone. Not yet. And if there was a way in, maybe there was a way out. Ethan's body jerked violently as the voice called his name, breaking through the suffocating whispers in his head. It was real. It had to be real. But where was it coming from? His muscles, stiffened by unnatural force, finally obeyed him. He wrenched his legs free from whatever invisible grip had been pulling him toward the pulpit. The monstrous figure standing there didn't move, but Ethan could feel its many mouths pressing against the veil, twitching hungrily. He staggered backward. The bodies on the floor twitched. Some reached for him, their fingers curling around his ankles, but they were weak, like echoes of something that had once been strong. He kicked free and forced his way between the pews. The shadows lining them remained still, but he felt their unseen eyes following his every movement. The voice called again. "Ethan, can you hear me?" It was distant but familiar. Someone he knew. That wasn't possible. No one else had come in with him. Marcus and the others had stayed outside, laughing at the thought of him stepping into the cursed chapel. And yet, he had no choice. He had to find the source. He turned sharply and ran. The chapel fought back. The pews shifted as he moved, the floor stretching and twisting like something alive. His steps grew heavier, as if the wood had become tar, trying to drag him down. His breath came in ragged gasps, and his heartbeat pounded so hard he thought it would shatter his ribs. The pulpit let out a low, bone-chilling hum. It wasn't a word. It wasn't even a sound that should have been possible for a living thing to make. It reverberated through the walls, shaking the rotted wood, making the candles flicker violently. Then the shadows moved, not just shifting, not just stretching. They lunged. Ethan saw them coming, dark figures melting from the pews, their hands elongated into clawed, skeletal shapes, their mouths stretching open wider than humanly possible. He dove between two pews, rolling onto his back just in time to see them swipe at the air where he had been a moment ago. A scream erupted from behind him, not his own, a woman's scream. His stomach twisted into a knot. He scrambled to his feet and turned toward the sound. The rows of pews were shifting again, realigning, pushing forward as if the chapel itself was herding him toward something. Then he saw her, a figure standing at the far end of the church, half shrouded in darkness. A girl. No, a woman. She looked terrified, her face pale, her dark hair damp and clinging to her face. She was wearing a soaked jacket, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of a broken pew. She wasn't a shadow. She wasn't a trick of the chapel. She was real, and she was looking straight at him. "Ethan," she whispered. He didn't know her. He had never seen her before in his life. But the way she said his name sent chills down his spine. Who are you?" he stammered. She shook her head. "No time. You have to run. It's—" Her voice cut off abruptly. The air shifted. Something huge moved behind him. Ethan didn't turn. He didn't need to. He could feel it. The presence. The sheer wrongness looming over him. A guttural sound rumbled from the pulpit. The veil ripped open, and Ethan caught the briefest glimpse of what lay beneath. Not a face. Not a man. A writhing, endless abyss of mouths, teeth, and blackened tongues, twisting and folding over each other, layered in grotesque formations, all whispering, hissing, laughing. The chapel walls trembled, the floor buckled, and then suddenly, everything went dark. Ethan's world collapsed into suffocating darkness. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was something deeper, heavier, pressing against his skin like wet cloth. The air was thick, clogged with a stench so vile it made his stomach churn. The whispers were gone. The pulpit's monstrous hum had faded. But something else remained, breathing, not his own. Something massive exhaled slowly in the blackness, the sound like air escaping through rotted pipes. It was close, too close. Ethan's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He wasn't dead, not yet, but he was somewhere else now. The chapel had swallowed him whole. A sharp pain lanced through his palm. His fingers brushed against something jagged, broken wood. A splintered pew. It was a tooth, smooth and sharp, longer than his hand, embedded in the ground like a buried dagger. He yanked his hand away, his breathing quick and shallow. Then came the sound, a slow, wet tearing, like flesh peeling from bone. Something was waking up. A light flickered ahead, faint and sickly, like fire struggling to stay alive. Ethan turned toward it, his legs weak and trembling beneath him. Every step felt like moving through sludge, but he pushed forward. He had to. The dim light revealed walls, but they weren't the stone walls of the chapel. These were pulsing, organic, veined with something black and oozing. Shapes moved beneath the surface, writhing, watching. Ethan's stomach clenched. The church wasn't just a place, it was alive. A rustling sound echoed behind him. He spun around. The woman from before was there. She stood a few feet away, her face pale and glistening with sweat. Her dark eyes darted to the walls, then back to him. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. Ethan swallowed. "No kidding. Where the hell are we?" She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. "The chapel, it's not just a building. It's something else. It doesn't just trap people, it feeds on them." A low groan rippled through the fleshy walls, as if the thing around them was listening. "Feeds," Ethan repeated, his throat dry. Ethan's skin prickled. "What's your name?" he asked. For a moment her lips parted as if she would answer. But then, a shriek tore through the air. Not human, not even close. The ground lurched beneath them, like something vast and unseen had taken a breath. She took a step closer. "The ones who die here, who get taken, they don't just disappear. They become part of it." The woman's eyes widened in terror. "It knows we're trying to escape." Ethan didn't wait. He grabbed her wrist and ran. The darkness behind them exploded with movement. Shapes poured from the walls, half-formed things, their faces stretched in silent, eternal screams. Arms too long and too thin clawed at the air as they surged forward, their movements unnatural, broken. Ethan's lungs burned as he sprinted down a corridor that hadn't been there before. The walls shifted, opening paths and closing others, twisting into a grotesque labyrinth designed to break minds. The woman stumbled beside him, her breath ragged. "We have to find the heart," she gasped. Ethan barely dodged a grasping hand that shot from the wall. "What?" She didn't answer, because suddenly they were falling. The ground beneath them vanished, and they plummeted into darkness. And the chapel laughed. The fall was endless. Ethan's scream tore from his throat, swallowed almost instantly by the abyss. His stomach lurched, his body weightless as he plummeted into the unknowable depths. The woman beside him was falling too, her fingers clawing at empty air, eyes wide with horror. Then, impact. The ground slammed into Ethan like a hammer, knocking the air from his lungs. For a moment everything blurred, his vision swimming with dark splotches. His body ached, but he was alive. A groan came from nearby. "The woman!" Ethan rolled onto his side, blinking rapidly. His breath hitched. The ground beneath him wasn't solid, it pulsed. A layer of skin stretched beneath his hands, slick and feverish to the touch. The veins that ran beneath it pulsed in slow, rhythmic beats. He scrambled back, revulsion twisting his stomach. The woman stirred, pushing herself upright. Her gaze darted around, her face growing paler by the second. They weren't in the chapel anymore. They were inside it. The walls around them weren't wood or stone. They were flesh, pulsing and shifting as though alive. The air was thick with a rancid smell, a mixture of blood, decay, and something far worse. Ethan swallowed hard. "Tell me we're not where I think we are." The woman's lips trembled. "We fell into it." A wet, gurgling sound echoed from somewhere deep within the walls. A heartbeat, slow and heavy, reverberated through the chamber. Ethan clenched his fists. "You said we need to find the heart." His voice was tight, controlled. He was trying not to panic. "How do we destroy it?" She hesitated. "No one ever has." "Great, that's encouraging." A ripple moved through the fleshy ground beneath them. Ethan froze. The woman's breath hitched. Something was coming. The air grew thick with the scent of rot. And then, the wall split open. From the gaping tear, something crawled out. It wasn't human. It had once been. Its torso was twisted, ribs exposed beneath translucent, stretched flesh. Its arms were too long, its fingers sharpened into claws that scraped against the ground. A mouth, sewn shut with blackened thread, hung open in a grotesque, soundless wail. Its eyes were worse. Dozens of them, scattered across its chest and face, all weeping thick, black fluid. They darted in different directions, rolling wildly, never settling on one place. Ethan couldn't breathe. The woman grabbed his wrist. "Run!" The creature lunged. They tore through the shifting corridors of flesh, the heartbeat growing louder with every step. The walls trembled as if the chapel itself was angry. A low voice rumbled through the air. Not words, not a language Ethan could understand. It was inside his head, pressing against his skull, filling his thoughts with whispers of surrender. He gritted his teeth and pushed forward. The creature shrieked behind them, its clawed hands swiping at their heels. The ground shifted beneath their feet, trying to swallow them whole. Up ahead, a chamber loomed, its center dominated by a grotesque, pulsating mass of flesh and veins. The heart. Ethan's chest tightened. If they were going to survive, they had to end this, and they had to do it now. Ethan's heart pounded as he and the woman skidded to a stop inside the chamber. The grotesque, pulsating mass in the center of the room throbbed in sickening rhythms, a network of thick, blackened veins stretching outward like diseased roots. The air was thick, filled with the scent of blood and decay. The thing chasing them shrieked, its countless black eyes rolling in wild, jerking motions. Its body convulsed, its fingers twitching as if preparing to strike. Ethan turned to the woman, his voice raw. "Tell me there's a way to kill this thing." She didn't answer immediately. Her gaze was locked on the pulsing mass in front of them, her lips moving in silent calculation. "The heart is the source," she whispered. "If we destroy it—" A guttural howl tore through the chamber as the creature lunged. Ethan shoved the woman out of the way and threw himself to the side. Clawed fingers raked against the ground where he had been standing a second earlier, carving deep trenches in the fleshy surface. The walls shuddered, reacting to the violence. The chapel felt their struggle. The woman scrambled to her feet, her breath ragged. "We need fire! It won't survive fire!" Ethan's stomach twisted. Fire. How the hell were they supposed to get fire in a place like this? The creature's many eyes focused on him. Then impossibly, it spoke. Or rather, the voices of countless tortured souls spoke through it. "You will never leave." Ethan's blood ran cold. The voice wasn't just one voice. It was hundreds, layered upon one another, crying, screaming, whispering all at once. It charged. Ethan barely dodged. The woman yanked a rusted, jagged piece of metal from the fleshy ground and swung it with all her strength. The shard buried itself into the creature's side. It didn't scream, it laughed. A horrible, wet, gurgling laughter that made Ethan's stomach churn. It reached for her. "No!" Ethan roared, launching himself forward. He grabbed the metal shard, yanking it free. Black ichor sprayed from the wound, sizzling as it hit the ground. The monster twisted unnaturally, its bones snapping and realigning as it turned toward him. The walls trembled harder. The heartbeat grew louder. Ethan realized something. The creature wasn't just guarding the heart. It was connected to it. If they hurt the monster enough, it might weaken the heart. He gritted his teeth. "We need to hurt it. Badly." The woman's eyes flashed with realization. "Then let's make it bleed." She grabbed another jagged piece of metal, and together, they attacked. The creature shrieked, writhing as the chapel itself howled in pain. The walls began to collapse, shaking violently. But Ethan knew this wasn't over yet. The chapel convulsed. The very walls around them twisted and groaned, reacting violently to the wounds inflicted upon the creature. The heartbeat, once a steady, menacing thrum, now stuttered, like a dying drum struggling to keep rhythm. Ethan didn't stop. He gripped the jagged metal tighter and drove it deeper into the creature's torso. A guttural wail erupted from its many mouths, a sound so inhuman that Ethan felt his skull vibrate from the force of it. The black ichor pouring from its wounds sizzled upon contact with the fleshy ground, sending up wisps of thick, acrid smoke. The woman wasn't idle either. She sliced, stabbed, and hacked at the abomination, her breaths coming in rapid, panicked bursts. The creature flailed wildly, its unnatural limbs bending in impossible directions, its many eyes bulging with fury. The chapel was angry. The walls shuddered, splitting open like gaping wounds, and from their depths emerged more figures. Ethan's blood ran cold. They weren't monsters. They were people. Or what was left of them. Some had no eyes. Others had mouths stitched shut. Some crawled on all four, their bodies horribly contorted, moving in unnatural, insect-like jerks. Their faces were twisted with agony, as if they were aware of their suffering. And worst of all, they were all reaching for Ethan and the woman. Ethan staggered back. "What the hell?" The woman's voice cracked. "They're the ones who were trapped before us." His stomach twisted. The chapel didn't just consume people, it remade them. A pair of hands lunged for him. Ethan barely dodged, slicing his makeshift weapon across the attacker's face. The thing let out a choked sob but kept moving, as if pain no longer mattered. The woman screamed as one of them latched onto her, fingers digging into her flesh. Ethan reacted without thinking. He grabbed her arm and yanked her free, sending the attacker toppling backward into the thrashing, shrieking mass of lost souls. The ground beneath them split open. A void yawned wide, deep and endless, revealing a pulsing, monstrous heart, the true core of the chapel. It wasn't just flesh and veins. It had faces, contorted, screaming, pleading. Ethan's stomach lurched. He wanted to vomit. The chapel was alive, and it had been feeding for centuries. The woman grabbed Ethan's wrist. "Now!" He didn't hesitate. They ran toward the heart, dodging the grasping limbs, the shrieking mouths, the twisting bodies of the damned. The air grew hot, thick with a rotting heat that made Ethan's lungs burn. The monster they had wounded, the guardian of the heart, was struggling to rise. Its body was collapsing, its limbs crumbling, but its eyes still burned with hatred. Ethan didn't care. He had one goal: destroy the heart. But how? His hands were slick with sweat and blood. His body ached. He had no weapons strong enough. Then, a flash of movement caught his eye. The woman had snatched a rusted torch from the ground, and it was lit. Ethan's breath caught. The chapel had torches, because it wanted its prisoners to see what was happening to them. The woman's eyes met his. "Burn it!" Ethan grabbed the torch. The chapel screamed. The heart pulsed violently, sensing what was coming. But Ethan didn't hesitate. The moment the torch pierced the heart, the entire chapel screamed. Not just a single voice, not even 100, thousands. Agonized, enraged, desperate wails erupted from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The very flesh of the chapel convulsed, trying to eject them, trying to undo what had just been done. Ethan felt the ground shift violently beneath him. He stumbled, barely catching himself as flames crawled across the blackened veins, spreading rapidly like a living creature. The woman grabbed his arm. "Run!" The heart thrashed, bulging outward, its grotesque, screaming faces melting in the fire's wake. The chapel was dying. The monstrous guardian, still half standing, let out a horrific wail as its body began disintegrating. The black ichor that held it together evaporating in the heat. Its limbs snapped, its eyes burst, and its massive, gaping mouth let out a final deafening shriek before it collapsed into itself. But the fire wasn't just consuming the heart, it was consuming everything. The walls cracked open, exposing endless, writhing tunnels of flesh and bone, all of it now engulfed in flames. Ethan and the woman ran, their lungs burning as the air filled with thick, choking smoke. The chapel buckled, its once living corridors collapsing inward. Up ahead, a door. It hadn't been there before, a way out. But between them and the door stood the lost souls. Their bodies, twisted, mutilated, were frozen, watching them with expressions that were no longer hostile, but pleading. Ethan slowed. His breath came in ragged gasps. They weren't attacking anymore. They were begging. The woman grabbed his wrist. "We can't save them." Her voice cracked. "They've been part of this place too long. If we don't leave now, we die too." Ethan clenched his fists. The lost souls, hundreds of them, watched as the fire swallowed them whole, and then they began to smile. For the first time in decades, centuries, they were being freed. Tears burned in Ethan's eyes, but he turned away, forcing himself to run. They reached the door just as the flames devoured the last of the chapel. Ethan threw himself through the threshold and hit the ground. Cold, damp grass, the smell of rain, the sound of wind rustling through trees. Ethan gasped, rolling onto his back. The woman lay beside him, staring up at the night sky in stunned silence. The chapel was gone. Nothing remained but an empty clearing, overgrown with ivy and weeds, as if it had never existed at all. The woman turned her head toward him, her expression unreadable. "It let us go." Ethan exhaled shakily. "No," he whispered. "We took our freedom back." A long silence stretched between them. Then ever so faintly, somewhere in the distance, a heartbeat, faint, weak, but still there. Ethan's stomach twisted, because deep down, he knew the chapel was never truly gone. It was just waiting, waiting for the next poor soul to stumble upon its cursed ground. And when they did, the doors would open once more. What do you think? Would you ever step foot inside an abandoned chapel alone at night? If you enjoyed this horrifying tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more terrifying stories. Let me know in the comments. What would you have done if you were trapped inside? And remember, some places were never meant to be entered. Some doors should never be opened.